Saudara pendengar, dalam salah satu pelajaran yang lalu, Iwan mengatakan bahwa dia akan mengajak Chris pergi ke Indonesia selama liburan musim panas di Australia untuk mengunjungi keluarganya. Sekarang, Iwan akan menyampaikan ajakan tersebut. Coba dengarkan.
Chris, I want to ask you something.
Sure, Iwan. What is it?
Well, can you come to Indonesia at the end of the year? Can you come and visit my family?
What? Iwan, what a surprise. Of course. Fantastic. That's a great idea. What about your family? Did you ask your father?
Yes. I wrote a letter last month, and I received an answer a few days ago. My father wants you to come and stay with us at the end of the year. He's going to have a big celebration.
That's wonderful.
He knows a lot about you and Helen and your family. He always asks about them in his letters.
Bukan main senangnya Chris menerima ajakan tersebut yang sangat tidak terduga-duga. Ayah Iwan telah mengundang Chris untuk tinggal bersama keluarganya selama liburan panjang universitas pada musim panas di akhir tahun. Nah, saat ini Chris dan Iwan sedang berbicara tentang perbedaan antara Sydney dan Jakarta yang mungkin akan dirasakan Chris.
Well, it's hot in Jakarta. It's always hot in Jakarta.
Dan dia akan bertanya apakah udaranya lembab, yang dalam bahasa Inggris ialah
Humid. Is it very humid, Iwan?
Yes, the weather's very humid in December.
It's humid in Sydney in December too.
Yes, but it's more humid in Jakarta.
Coba dengarkan lagi kalimat tadi yang berarti udara di Jakarta lebih lembab.
It's more humid in Jakarta.
I see. It's more humid in Jakarta.
Untuk mengatakan udara di Jakarta lebih lembab, kita pakai kata yang artinya lebih, yaitu
More. More.
diikuti kata yang artinya lembab, yaitu
Humid.
jadi ungkapannya ialah
More humid. Humid. More humid.
Saudara pendengar, berikut ini akan kami berikan beberapa perbandingan lagi tentang persamaan dan perbedaan antara kedua tempat itu.
Jakarta's more interesting. The streets are more crowded.
And the weather's more humid.
Yes, it usually rains in December. And when the rain starts, it's very regular. It always rains from about 12 o'clock to about 2:30. It's more regular.
The rain's more regular in Jakarta.
Sekarang, coba ucapkan contoh-contoh tadi sesudah Chris. Siap?
Jakarta's more interesting. The streets are more crowded. The weather's more humid. The rain's more regular.
Baiklah. Sekarang akan saudara dengar beberapa perbandingan lain tentang Sydney dan Indonesia.
The scenery is more beautiful. And the fruit's more delicious in Indonesia.
Coba saudara ulangi sesudah Chris.
The scenery's more beautiful. The fruit's more delicious. Iwan's more talkative.
Kalimat yang terakhir berarti Iwan lebih banyak bicara. Coba ucapkan sesudah Chris.
Iwan's more talkative.
Baiklah, saudara-saudara. Saudara pendengar, mari kita kembali pada perbandingan antara Sydney dan Jakarta. Ungkapan seperti
Jakarta's weather's more humid
adalah singkatan dari kalimat yang lengkap, yaitu
Jakarta's weather is more humid than Sydney's weather.
kata baru yang dipakai ialah
Than. Than.
Dalam sebuah kalimat, kata than kita pakai dengan kata more untuk membuat suatu perbandingan.
More humid than. Jakarta's weather's more humid than Sydney's weather.
Perhatikan ucapan kalimat itu dalam percakapan sehari-hari.
Jakarta's weather's more humid than Sydney's weather.
Berikut ini akan kami berikan beberapa contoh perbandingan lagi. Coba dengarkan.
Jakarta's more interesting than Sydney. Jakarta's streets are more crowded than Sydney's streets. Iwan's more talkative than Helen. I'm more talkative than Iwan.
Dan dengarkan sebuah ungkapan lain dari Iwan. Dia akan mengatakan bahwa di Australia, bahasa Inggris lebih berguna daripada bahasa Indonesia. Tentu saja, dia dapat berbicara dalam kedua bahasa itu. Tetapi di Australia,
English is more useful than Indonesian.
English is more useful than Indonesian.
coba ucapkan ungkapan itu sesudah Chris. Siap?
English is more useful than Indonesian.
And of course in Indonesia, Chris, Indonesian's more useful than English.
That's right. Indonesian's more useful than English.
Ya, di Indonesia, pada umumnya bahasa Indonesia lebih berguna daripada bahasa Inggris. Coba ulangi apa yang diucapkan Chris.
Indonesian's more useful than English.
We can also say the food's more expensive in Sydney than in Indonesia.
I see. The food's more expensive in Sydney than in Indonesia.
For example, fruit. Fruit's more expensive in Sydney than in Indonesia.
Saudara pendengar, coba ulangi kalimat yang terakhir sesudah Chris.
Fruit's more expensive in Sydney than in Indonesia.
Baiklah. Sekarang, mari kita coba latihan yang berbeda. Saudara akan mendengar suatu keterangan, misalnya,
Fruit's more expensive in Sydney.
dan saudara hendaknya mengatakan,
Fruit's more expensive in Sydney than in Indonesia.
Iwan akan memberikan keterangannya, dan saudara harus melengkapkan kalimatnya. Kemudian, Chris akan mengucapkan jawaban yang betul. Ulangilah jawaban itu. Siap?
Food's more expensive in Sydney.
Food's more expensive in Sydney than in Indonesia.
Mangoes are more expensive in Sydney.
Mangoes are more expensive in Sydney than in Indonesia.
English is more useful in Sydney.
English is more useful in Sydney than in Indonesia.
Sekarang, mari kita berbicara tentang Jakarta. Misalnya, Iwan akan mengatakan,
Jakarta's weather's more humid.
dan saudara hendaknya mengatakan,
Jakarta's weather's more humid than Sydney's.
Chris akan mengucapkan jawaban yang betul, dan ulangilah jawaban itu. Siap? Mari kita mulai dengan yang pertama.
Jakarta's markets are more interesting.
Jakarta's markets are more interesting than Sydney's.
Jakarta's weather's more humid.
Jakarta's weather's more humid than Sydney's.
Jakarta's streets are more crowded.
Jakarta's streets are more crowded than Sydney's.
Bagus. Saudara pendengar, tadi kita telah berlatih membuat perbandingan. Misalnya, membandingkan sebuah kota dengan kota lain dan seorang dengan seseorang lain. Dan kata yang penting yang kita pakai ialah
More than.
dalam bahasa Inggris, kadang-kadang tidak kita pakai kata
More
di muka kata keadaannya, tetapi kata keadaan itu sendiri yang kita ubah. Ejaan kata keadaan itu berubah, dan dengan demikian ucapannya juga berbeda. Kalimat berikut ini berarti udara Jakarta lebih panas daripada Sydney. Coba dengarkan.
Jakarta's weather's hotter than Sydney's weather.
Kata yang berarti panas, kita ubah menjadi
Hot, hotter, hotter. Jakarta's weather's hotter than Sydney's weather.
Sekarang, coba saudara dengarkan contoh berikut ini, yang artinya gedung ini lebih tinggi daripada gedung itu.
This building's taller than that building. This building's taller than that building.
Dalam contoh itu, kita tidak memakai kata
More,
tetapi hanya mengubah kata keadaannya.
tall, taller, taller.
Sekarang, coba dengarkan beberapa pertanyaan dari Chris. Dan perhatikan kata-kata yang dipakainya untuk perbandingan.
Wider, bigger, smaller. The streets in Melbourne are wider than the streets in Sydney. Are the streets wide in Jakarta? Are they wider than the streets in Sydney? And the shops, are they bigger or smaller?
Sekarang, mari kita berlatih. Coba ucapkan kalimat-kalimat berikut sesudah Chris. Siap?
Are the streets wider than Sydney's streets? Are the buildings taller? Are the streets wider? Are the shops smaller? Are the houses bigger? Are the streets noisier? Is the traffic heavier?
Saudara pendengar, sekarang akan kami berikan keterangan singkat tentang kedua cara yang berbeda dalam membuat perbandingan. Cara mana yang dipakai tergantung pada kata keadaan yang kita pergunakan. Coba dengarkan.
I'm talkative. I'm more talkative than E1. Helen's short. She's shorter than E1. Talkative. More talkative. Short. Shorter.
Dalam contoh-contoh tadi, apakah saudara dapat melihat perbedaan dalam panjangnya kata-kata keadaan yang dipakai?
Talkative. Short.
Kalau kita memakai kata keadaan yang pendek dalam perbandingan, kita tambahkan bunyi pada akhir kata keadaan itu.
Short. Shorter. Wide. Wider. This street is wider than that street.
Kalau kata keadaan itu panjang, seperti misalnya,
Talkative.
kita pakai kata
More.
di muka kata keadaan itu. Misalnya,
Talkative. More talkative. Expensive. More expensive. Fruit's more expensive in Sydney than in Jakarta.
coba ucapkan beberapa kalimat sesudah Chris.
Jakarta's hotter than Sydney. Iwan's more talkative than Helen.
Baiklah, saudara-saudara. Saudara pendengar, Chris dan Iwan telah membicarakan tentang Sydney dan Jakarta. Chris merasa sangat gembira dengan ajakan Iwan, tetapi ada hal lain lagi yang dipikirkannya, dan dia akan menerangkannya kepada Jane. Coba dengarkan.
Chris, Iwan told me about your trip to Indonesia at the end of the year. Are you excited?
Yes, I am, Jane, but
It's a wonderful opportunity. You can meet Iwan's family and see a new country.
yes, I know, Jane, but
But what, Chris?
I plan to buy an old car at Christmas. You know, I saved some money from my job and I could borrow some money from Dad, and I wanted to work during the long vacation.
But a visit to Indonesia's more exciting than an old car, Chris.
I know, Jane.
Well, can you buy an old car and go to Indonesia too?
No, I can't.
Saudara pendengar, Chris sangat gembira akan pergi ke Indonesia selama liburan panjang. Tetapi dia agak kecewa karena dengan demikian tidak dapat bekerja selama liburan itu untuk mendapat uang guna membeli mobil. Jane menyarankan agar dia membeli sepeda motor karena lebih murah dan lebih hemat.
What about a motorbike?
Eh? What do you mean?
Well, a motorbike's cheaper than a car. And it's more economical too.
Yes, that's true.
And a motorbike's more useful. You know, in traffic it's smaller than a car and it doesn't use much petrol.
I know, Jane, but there are a lot of problems with motorbikes. You know, when it rains or when there's a lot of heavy traffic.
Chris dan Jane akan terus berbicara tentang sepeda motor dan mobil dan membandingkan keduanya untuk mencari persamaan antara kedua kendaraan itu. Chris akan mengatakan bahwa mobil tua sama murahnya dengan sepeda motor. Coba dengarkan.
An old car is as cheap as a motorbike. As cheap as.
Jadi kita pakai kata
As.
kemudian kata keadaannya menjadi
As cheap.
dan kemudian kata
As. As cheap as. As cheap as. An old car is as cheap as a motorbike.
Chris is as old as Iwan. Chris is 20 and Iwan's 20. Iwan's as old as Chris.
Dan bila Iwan dan Chris memikirkan perjalanan ke Indonesia pada akhir tahun, mereka keduanya sama-sama gembira.
Iwan's as excited as Chris. Chris is as excited as Iwan.
Baiklah, sekarang coba ucapkan kalimat seluruhnya sesudah Jane.
Chris is as old as Iwan. Iwan's as old as Chris. Chris is as excited as Iwan.
Saudara pendengar, ungkapan-ungkapan tadi dapat juga kita pakai dalam pertanyaan. Sekarang, Jane akan bertanya kepada Chris, apakah sepeda motor seaman mobil? Coba dengarkan.
Is a motorbike as safe as a car?
Sekarang, coba saudara ulangi pertanyaan-pertanyaan Jane berikut ini. Jangan lupa bahwa lagu kalimat tanya berbeda. Siap?
Is it as safe as a car? Is it as cheap as a car? Is it as noisy as a car? Is it as dangerous as a car?
Baiklah. Saudara sudah berlatih mengajukan pertanyaan. Sekarang, mari kita dengarkan jawaban atas pertanyaan-pertanyaan itu.
Is a motorbike as expensive as a car, Chris?
No, it isn't.
Is it as comfortable?
No, it isn't.
Is it as useful as a car?
Yes, it is. It's as useful as a car.
Is it as economical?
It's more economical than a car.
Is it as safe as a car?
No, it isn't.
And is a motorbike as fast as a car?
No, it isn't.
Dalam percakapan tadi, kita dengar jawaban yang singkat. Sekarang, mari kita dengarkan jawaban yang panjang.
No, a motorbike isn't as expensive as a car. It isn't as comfortable as a car. It isn't as safe as a car. It isn't as fast as a car. Isn't as. Isn't as. It isn't as fast as a car.
Sekarang, coba ucapkan bagian demi bagian sesudah Chris.
As fast as a car. It isn't as fast as a car.
Bagus. Sekarang coba ucapkan beberapa kalimat lagi, bagian demi bagian. Siap?
As expensive as a car. It isn't as expensive as a car. As comfortable as a car. It isn't as comfortable as a car.
Baiklah. Berbicara tentang sepeda motor, Chris mengatakan bahwa
It isn't as safe as a car.
kalimat itu berarti bahwa sepeda motor tidak seaman mobil, atau mobil lebih aman daripada sepeda motor. Coba dengarkan kedua kalimat itu.
A motorbike isn't as safe as a car. A car is safer than a motorbike.
Sekarang, Chris dan Jane akan memberikan beberapa pasang contoh lagi. Chris akan mengucapkan kalimat yang pertama dan Jane yang kedua. Kemudian, coba saudara ulangi kalimat yang kedua saja. Siap?
A motorbike isn't as comfortable as a car.
A car is more comfortable than a motorbike.
A motorbike isn't as safe as a car.
A car is safer than a motorbike.
A motorbike isn't as heavy as a car.
A car is heavier than a motorbike.
Bagus. Saudara pendengar, sekarang mari kita lanjutkan dengan suatu cara khusus tentang pemakaian perbandingan dalam bahasa Inggris, yaitu dalam bentuk perumpamaan yang dalam bahasa Inggris disebut
Sayings.
barangkali perumpamaan-perumpamaan yang akan saudara dengar mengingatkan saudara pada perumpamaan yang sudah saudara ketahui.
Hi, Iwan. I saw Chris a moment ago. He was as happy as a sand boy.
I beg your pardon?
Chris, he was as happy as a sand boy.
What do you mean?
He was very happy because he's going to visit Indonesia at the end of the year.
I know, but you said as happy as a sandboy. What does that mean?
Well, it means he's very happy.
What's a sandboy?
I don't know. We just say it to describe a happy person. It's a saying.
Tell me some other sayings.
Well, as cold as ice.
As cold as ice? Oh, yes, when the weather's cold.
As bitter as a lemon.
Yes, that's good.
As dry as a bone.
As dry as a bone?
Yes, a bone is always dry.
Ah, yes, I see. As dry as a bone.
As slow as a wet week.
As slow as a wet week? Oh, when it rains.
Yes, you know, when it rains for a week and you can't go out, the time passes slowly.
Yes, as slow as a wet week.
Hi.
Oh, hi, Chris. I know a saying. As beautiful as a flower.
Oh, Iwan.
We don't say that in English. We say as pretty as a picture.
Well, I say Helen's as beautiful as a flower.
Oh, Iwan, that's lovely.
Come on, you two. I want to show you something. It's outside.
A bicycle.
Yes, I'm not going to buy an old car, and I'm not going to buy a motorbike. I'm going to use this bicycle.
Well, it isn't as expensive as a motorbike.
That's right. And it's good exercise. At the end of the year, I'm going to be as fit as a fiddle. Bye.
As fit as a fiddle?
Yes, it's just a saying, as fit as a fiddle.
Yang berarti sangat sehat. Nah, saudara pendengar, sudah tiba saatnya kami minta diri. Jangan lupa membaca bagian yang berjudul sesudah siaran dari pelajaran tadi dalam buku saudara. Dan jangan lupa pula mempelajari bagian yang berjudul sebelum siaran dari pelajaran nomor 35. Dan sekarang kami ucapkan goodbye, listeners.